Hello everyone and welcome. I'm Sarah Liz and today we're going to make our second card in my box card series. So this gumball machine we made in the first video, and in this one we're going to use the same die set to create the box, but then we're going to use other dies to create a scene and really make this our own. If you haven't watched the first video, that's okay, you don't have to, but if you've never seen a box card before, it might be helpful to watch that one first. So I have cut two of those base pieces out of some light blue cardstock. And out of the second one, I have pulled the smaller of the rounded rectangles and I've cut an aperture from there. I also cut a piece of white cardstock to 3.5 by 5.5 for the background of our scene. And we're going to use the Spellbinders Rustic Garden set to build most of the components in here. This is a brand new set, and when Spellbinders offered to send this one to me, I was ecstatic. I knew this would be perfect to make a card for my father-in-law. That man is an absolute gem, and I love him to pieces, and so I wanted to make something really special for him. He's been working to become a master gardener, and so this just felt kind of perfect. I'm also bringing in the Umbrella Blooms die set, which is an older one from Spellbinders, to fill in our barrel. There are some blooms and grassy floral pieces in the collection that the Rustic Garden stuff comes from. I'll link them below, but I already had flowers, so I thought this worked out pretty well. So what I'm doing now is adding a little bit of weathered wood, distress ink, and a little bit of vintage photo to some of the pieces of our fence. I've cut them out of a barely cream cardstock, and there's some debossed detail in there that I wanted to highlight. And it's outside, right? I didn't want it to look too pristine. It just didn't feel right. So there are, for the two longest pieces, some layering elements. And when you cut them out, they're on separate dies. So it's really easy to tell which of these top layering elements goes with which larger piece. I just numbered them 1 and 2 before I started inking everything up so I didn't get confused. You could totally skip that part. It's fine, right? But I have them, so I figured I'd try it out and see how it went. I think if I did it again, I might even cut that top piece from a slightly darker color, or I might ink it a little bit darker just to create a little more variation in the texture of the wood. This wheel has 3 pieces, and if I was going to glue it flat to my card, I would have put the piece that cuts out this light brown wheel inside of the larger circle that cut out my dark brown. And then the dark brown piece would fit right around the outside and layer on my card. But mine's going to be popped up. So I actually brought in just another circle die from a set that I have to cut that dark brown piece so that they would overlap very slightly. Again, if you're just gluing it flat to your card, you don't need to do that, but I wanted to point it out here since we are going to pop it up later. Next, I'm bringing in a little bit of that vintage photo again for this barrel. I'm just going around the edges. I wanted to highlight the roundness of it. The sort of debossed cut lines in the barrel already do some of that. And then like a fool, I tried to ink up that dark brown piece with the same vintage photo, like maybe it would show up. Oh well, yeah, I didn't need to do that. I'm bringing in a little bit of candied apple just to add a little bit of depth to our water pump. You could skip all of this inking, right? Aside from the sky, I think the pieces, there's so much detail in them, right? So you certainly could save a little time and just assemble the die cut pieces onto the card. But it's for Ken, right? And I wanted to make him something really, really special. So I am taking my white cardstock, this is that 3.5 by 5.5, and a cloud stencil, and I am just adding a few clouds into my background of my scene. And then I grabbed this Clouds and Grass Slimline die set from Pixie Dust Designs because I wanted a little bit of grass here on this white piece, and then I will cut a second one and we will add it to the very front of the box card, but that'll happen later on. I'm just gluing it to the bottom and then trimming it off with my scissors. To begin assembling our box card, I am placing the good side of the cardstock against my mat, and I am folding those flaps towards me. To get these started on the piece with the aperture, I'm just using my ruler to help begin those creases going the wrong direction first, and then I'll flip it over and fold the flaps back toward me. That way I don't accidentally crumple the sides. Now I'm going to start assembling the scene onto my white cardstock. So I'm going to start with my little water pump and I'm going to glue him down. He comes in 2 pieces. I added some silver details on here, though when I looked up water pumps online after this, they don't have that. I don't know why I thought it needed it. Also, if you have a recommendation for a silver pen, please let me know. The one I'm using, I think I've had for a decade and it is finally drying up on me. And it wasn't the best to start with. So yeah, I'm in the market for a new one. My fence has a center post and it has these debossed sort of cut lines going down the middle. That's how you know that's the center post. And it doesn't have those cut lines where the fence attaches to it. So I've just kind of laid out my pieces where I want them and used some temporary tape to hold down that center post because I'm going to tuck these right behind there, but I want to make sure it's not moving. It felt a little fiddly and the tape really helped me out on that one. So I'm using my wet glue. This lets me wiggle a little bit and make sure, like, I want those 2 fence posts to be parallel, but I'm also bringing them at an angle. So this feels like the corner of a fence instead of just a flat fence. And I liked the sort of interest that that brought to our scene. If you look online, there are really cool pictures with this die set. People have done some really amazing things. So maybe check on that. I am just flipping up the piece that I had taped down and adding my glue, and then I'll lower that back down slowly to make sure I get that placement right where I want it. But it worked out super slick and made this fence pretty easy to put together. So this is going to sit just perfectly right inside of our box card. Okay, the flaps are 3/4 of an inch. And then that background piece again is 3.5 by 5.5. Do you need a die to cut that? No, you really don't. Aside from like the hole in the middle, you could do that by hand. I just find that the die simplifies everything for me. In my next box card video, we'll do it without any specialty dies, but I thought this was a really great way to just get our footing before we dig into that. Next, I'm going to assemble my barrel, and I've tucked some of the blooms inside. I love that the top of the barrel has like a little hole in it, so it made it really easy to tuck those in. And then I used some micro pour tape. It's surgical tape that's super, super cheap to tape it on there. I like that better than like Scotch tape because then later when I go to glue something behind it, it's a paper tape. It glues together much more easily. So I have just those couple pieces hanging out, and then I'll take some of these smaller blooms and kind of tuck them on the front and spilling out of the barrel. And I just love the look of this. And I think it adds something that's really bright and cheerful to the card. We're going to pop this barrel up on the inside. So I cut a second one of those tan pieces. It's like a craft cardstock. And I'm going to glue that to the back just so we have some extra stability. So this piece measures 3/4 of an inch by 2 3/4 of an inch. This is going to be our pop-up. I am going to score this at 1/4 inch, 1 1/4 inches, 1.5 inches, and 2.5 inches. We are making a box. Okay, it's like a tall, skinny box. All of these score lines are going to fold the same direction, and you'll see the top and the bottom of this are really skinny, and the front and back of it are really tall. I'm going to add some glue to one of those skinny flaps, and I'm going to fold the other skinny flap over on it. And while this is drying, I'm pressing it so that it folds flat. That's how the pop-up mechanism works. That way I know I can still fold my card flat to get it into an envelope. I am going to secure my white panel where we've been building our scene to the back of that box card. All right. And now I'm going to take my box, right? Remember, it folds flat, and I used a pencil just to show you guys where that score line is. So I have at the bottom my little part of the box, and then on the back my tall part. And I'm putting that score line right into the score line, the fold at the bottom of the box card. This is an easy, easy pop-up mechanism. Okay, I put something heavy on it and I stepped away to let it dry a little bit. But now when I fold this card flat, that box will flatten out. And then when we open the box, it will pop up, so that barrel will have dimension. You can use this on the inside of a card. You can use it in a box card. It's one of the simplest pop-up mechanisms there is. Next, I'm adding glue just to the big part of our box, right? At the very top, I still have that score line and then the skinny strip. I did not put glue up there. I only put it on the front, and we are attaching our barrel, and you can see from the side, we've got this incredible dimension for our barrel, and that will fold flat when we put this in our envelope. To glue the box together, I have the pretty side, the front side of my card facing my mat, and I am adding glue to the flap, only up to the score line. Then I will lay the other flap into it. Okay, I'm going to pick that up. I'm going to make sure I haven't overlapped any of those score lines. I do need this to fold up into a box and to lay flat as I'm creasing those pieces. Then I will open the card all the way back up again. I'll fold the flap in and add glue. On the other side, I am going to fold at the score line that is just inside that window that we cut, and I will lay this flat into the glue. That way I know as I'm securing the box together that the whole thing will lay flat and fit into an envelope. I did bring in my bone folder just to reinforce that score line at the bottom. And I'm now straightening everything out. My box card is put together, but I noticed that it was a little bit flimsy. And it's a 100-pound cardstock, but that border around the edge is not very thick. So I've taken another piece that is 3.5 by 5.5, and I'm using the same window die. And I'm just cutting a piece that's going to layer right on top of that. It will add a little extra stability to this box card. If you don't want to have to do that, you might use like the oval piece that we used for the gumball machine. It leaves a larger border around and will inherently create more stability. As a recommendation for a box card, I think 100-pound cardstock is a really, really good idea. I don't actually recommend going a lot heavier than that. At about 120 pounds, you're going to run into problems where things aren't folding quite the way that you want them to. You do need it to be able to move. I am going to put this wheel in the corner of my box card. So I have just stuck it temporarily onto the corner of a white piece of cardstock, and I've used that as a guide to cut this down a little bit. I'll remove the tape, and now I'm going to add some glue just to the places where it overlaps the edge of my box card. Just tiny little dots of glue. This is barely art glue. The fine tip really is useful here, and it's super strong. So I am not worried about anything happening to that wheel. Like, I know before my father-in-law gets this card that my kids are going to mess with it. It's just going to happen. One of them is delicate and one of them is not. I'm not worried about the wheel. It's going to be fine. So now I'm adding another piece of that grass to the very front of my box card. So it looks like that wheel has kind of like sunk into the ground a little bit. I just thought that was a really fun kind of detail. And then another layer of dimension for our card. And then I will just fold this flat so it's really easy to clip off the edges. There are, in that set from Pixie Dust, there are two strips of grass. One creates sort of a hill, and then the other one is straight. So there's a lot of options in there as well. I am coming in with the Hummingbird sentiments. These came out not that long ago. And I love this little sentiment that says, "Your kindness means everything." Ken is one of the most generous people I know. He volunteers his time. He's been taking care of the turtle, this snapping turtle, at my husband's old elementary school since my husband was in elementary school. So I don't know, like at least 30 years. At least 30 years. And he was just there the other day and he was telling me about how the pump broke. And so he does that. He loves butterflies. He has a butterfly garden in his backyard. And in the fall, he brings caterpillars, monarch larvae, to the kindergarten at my son's school. and like goes in and teaches the kids about butterflies, and they get to watch them make their cocoons. And I mean, he is just one of the kindest, most generous people I've ever met. And if you meet him, he will talk your ear off and you will laugh hysterically. So I thought this sentiment was just perfect for him. As I'm putting this final touch onto my card, I noticed that my glue got a little bit onto that gray cardstock. It was just a tiny little bit. So I brought in my mono sand eraser and I'm able to remove most of that. It just darkened it a little bit. And I was able to sand that off. That finishes up our box card. Again, this is gonna fold flat. It fits beautifully into an envelope. I love this one. It's from Honeybee. I think I got it on clearance. If it's still available, I will link it below. There's a little bit of bulk, right? So probably there's a little extra postage on this, but quite frankly, I'm hand delivering it. Anytime I make a card this fancy, I'm hand delivering. I hope you've enjoyed this and that you'll give a box card a try. I have another box card video coming up soon. So please like and subscribe, leave me a comment, let me know if you've got ideas for other projects in the future, and I will see you next time.